So hey guys, it's Ziant again. Episode 3 of Final Fantasy's Failures. Today, Final Fantasy IX. This is a tough one for me because of all of the Final Fantasies on the PS1 and PS2, 9 is the one I've played and thought about the least. Which is not to say that I've played it any less than 10. In fact, I've probably completed 10 far fewer times than I've completed 9. But I haven't played 9 with the same depth that I played even 10, and especially 7 and 8. So, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about what could have gone better in Final Fantasy IX, I don't think they opened the world up to you soon enough. And they tease you with the prospect of an airship for the entirety of the first 2.5 discs. Now, in Final Fantasy VII, you don't technically get an airship until fairly late on Disc 2, and you don't get full access to the entire world as far as unlocks and cool stuff is concerned until Disc 3. But, what's interesting about 7 is that the pacing is such that you don't think you need an airship until you get it. The same could be said of Final Fantasy VI. You don't get an airship until fairly late in the middle of the game. But, again, the pacing is such that you don't need an airship because you have Figaro's Castle. And that brings me to the point of pseudo-airships, something I saw first in Final Fantasy VI, but I'm sure existed before then. And when I say pseudo-airship, I mean it's a mode of transportation alternate to that of the actual airship. So, for example, a ship, which I know you get in Final Fantasy IX. Or the plane that goes in shallow water, or the buggy in Final Fantasy VII, and Balamb Garden in Final Fantasy VIII. And like I say, I know that in 9 they give you a boat that allows you to explore the world around you. But, and this might just be a sense on my part, the boat section in 8 is incredibly linear and forced. There's only one goal and only one good way to get there. Balamb Garden, while the same could be said, you can still explore the area around. There's not a very set path. And in 7, when you get the downed airplane, whose name escapes me, while you are sort of forced towards the island of Wutai, and Yuffie's hometown and the boss fights, and the sub-story thereof, you can go straight to the Temple of the Ancients, or to the Gold Saucer, and you're not punished for it. But if memory serves, in Final Fantasy IX, you're given a boat to go on one mission, and then it is granted to you for a very limited period of time. And the cardinal error I think 9 makes when it comes to world travel was the Hildegard one. You find out early in the game that it's been stolen, and then you find it in the inventory of the villain of the game. And then it's a railroad. It takes you one place and acts as a really crappy shop, and you never see it again after that mission. I expected, and indeed desired, the ability to use the Hildegard one. And by the time I got the third ship, which was the one you were supposed to be using, I was annoyed that I had been denied this freedom as far into the game as I was. And even in something like Final Fantasy VIII, where Balamb Garden can't move very fast, it can go over shallow water, or in Final Fantasy VII with the downed plane, or Figaro's Castle being one of the worst offenders, you could literally go between 2 individual locations and nowhere else. Again, I say that the pacing is what made it. At that point in the game, the pacing was incredibly slow. Because as the saying goes, don't split the party. And they split the party. The same happened in 6, and I didn't like it there either, which I may touch on in the future. But no discussion of Final Fantasy IX can occur without at least touching on the final boss fight, or final boss fights. I liked that there was a 2-stage final boss. You went from Death Guys to Transkuja. And Transkuja was a very hard fight, but it was enjoyable, there was meaning to it. And then you face Necron, who makes no sense in the context of the game. Yes, he's this spirit of annihilation, and they've made the point of most Final Fantasy bosses are obsessed with annihilation. Kefka, X-Death, Zeramus, Ultimecia, all of them all want all existence denied. I will destroy everything, blah blah blah. But Kuja is a much more depressed character than that. He is the antithesis of Zidane. And when you defeat him, it's like you've fixed or completely destroyed the cracked mirror that Kuja represented for Zidane. And in that sense, Necron could be the silver backing that acted as the reflecting portion of Kuja's cracked mirror. And in that sense, the analogy works. But because you never get a sense that Necron is even a threat at any point in the game, he becomes this tacked on, almost useless boss fight that is almost for show. Now, of course, it's not as bad as the Yevon boss fight in Final Fantasy X, where you can't lose. I think that's kind of silly. And the same sort of philosophy is true for the Final Fantasy X final boss. But if you're going to have a boss character who doesn't seem to have any particular use or place in the story beyond being the final boss, you haven't done your job as a storyteller. And as a storyteller myself, that's not fun.